Welcome to Connections, a podcast from the Graymere Church of Christ in Columbia, Tennessee. Our goal is to have discussions and messages that encourage us and strengthen our faith. We appreciate you joining us. Let's keep learning and growing together. Hello, thank you for joining us in Connections. We're really grateful that you're choosing to spend time participating with some of these spiritual conversations that we hope are encouraging to you. This is not just for members at Graymere. This is for anyone who's looking for some encouragement. And I'm excited today. We're going to spend some time with Chad Landman, who is always here in our podcast because he's the one who makes these things happen. And so all of the how good it looks and how great our setup is in here, all of that is done by Chad. He does an awesome job with that. And so we are going to spend some time talking about some technology issues, but also thinking about how that affects our relationships with our children and how that affects our children's development. We've touched on that some already when we talked with John David about youth ministry, with Ben Dials about the way young people learn. And it's just really an inescapable fact that they're being shaped by a lot of the technology they're exposed to. Chad has done for years work in active digital parenting in workshops all around the country and has put together a lot of resources on this. And so we're going to ask him to share some of those, and we'll pick his brain a little bit with some questions. And I think this will be really beneficial for us as we get started out. So one thing maybe we could start with is when you do your active digital parenting workshops, different places, what are some of the common questions people have? What are some of the common needs that those try to meet?
Yeah. So I'll do your second question first. The needs that it's trying to meet is very simply encouraging and basically energizing parents. Mm-hmm. Because it can be so, this being two teenage boys now, like being a parent of teenagers and even younger kids is just so demanding anyways. And then you throw in technology and there's a whole nother layer of complexity that has to be managed because any good parent is going to want to manage what a kid sees on their screens.
Right.
And this day and age, having zero screen time is almost unheard of. And so that's one of the benefits is really encouraging and energizing. I've learned over the course of, and I've been doing it I was thinking about it today, doing it for over 11 years now.
Wow.
And this is a ministry that started, here at Graymere. Mm-hmm. Chris Webb had an idea to bring me over. He called me up one day and he said, "Hey, you're the only nerd I know." And he said,
that's surprising because he knew me. But
he said, "You're the only tech nerd I know. I need you to come over here and do 3 Wednesday nights in a row for us." And so I was in Lewisburg at the time, so it was a 20-minute drive over here. Yeah. And I was thinking I was going to talk to a class of parents that was 10 or 20 parents or whatever. I show up and there's 150 people in our FR rooms. And I was blown away at how much in demand that this would be. And we called it like the internet safety kind of stuff then. And it kind of snowballed into something, I've still to this day almost done near zero promotion for it, and just word of mouth gets around to churches. And I've done in the last 11 years over 100 workshops around the country. So it's been amazing, and it started right here. So I fully view this as like a Graymere ministry, and I ended up. It was kind of poetic because I ended up working here a year later, which was all the more awesome. Yeah. But I credit really Chris Webb and Graymere with all the success and everything. And it's been wonderful to be able to talk to that. But yeah, going back to your question, the main idea was to encourage and kind of uplift parents, kind of hit them hard a little bit with the truth. But at the same time, my 3 kind of session workshop is designed to kind of hit them hard and then educate them and then encourage them. And it's kind of in that way. So it's really one of those things of like, really just encouraging parents saying, you can do this. Yeah. There has never been an easier time to be a great digital parent and to secure your kid's future. Because like you said, that's one of the main concerns. That was one of your other question was one of the main concerns is how are our kids being developed?
Mm-hmm.
How are their brain chemistry, the way that they're maturing earlier on in life than previous generations is all because of screens, is all because of the smartphone. And there's been so much new research that has been done just in the last 5 to 10 years, especially with the COVID period in 2020, when kids were, we were all kind of glued to screens.
Yeah.
And so there was a ton of research done after that. And we're still seeing kind of the impacts of kids that were in kindergarten and first grade not being able to go to school and not having those incredible formative years, especially in kindergarten and preschool, of not being able to be in an actual classroom with actual other people for a period of, and it varied by section of the country, by different countries, but anywhere up to 2 to 3 months just doing that was detrimental to them. So, but yeah, roundabout way of answering your question, but yeah, it's really been to just energize and encourage parents and really just go through the practical steps of helping them secure what I call securing their children's digital future.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things you pointed out too is that there is a hunger for that. There may have been a time where parents needed convincing that this was an issue.
Yes.
But I kind of feel like we're at a time now where we all understand it's an issue. And so there's this hunger for tools. And one of the things you pointed out was there's never been a better time to be a good digital parent. And so I would guess that's referring to all the options that are out there, the resources that are there, which could seem overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah.
So what are some things you point parents to, some resources, some of those kinds of strategies that are helpful?
So really, and I will say this, 2/3 of the workshop, it's like a 3-hour workshop. So 2/3 of the workshop is honestly not about those tools.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the mentality that we as parents have behind those tools.
Yeah.
Because what I found out very early on, and I did not have older kids, so I didn't have to worry about this. And anybody knows that a parent you can talk about not having teenagers when you don't have teenagers, right?
Yeah.
So when I did this and when early on, it was like you said, there wasn't a whole lot of concern. It was just kind of like, nah, this is the next thing. Yeah. And I was kind of having to grab parents by the shoulders, not literally, but grab them by the shoulders and shake them and say, hey, you've got to pay attention to this stuff. But I've seen a generational shift to, about 2016, 2017 of this generational shift. And then really in 2020, 2021 of that shift to this younger generation of parents. And the good news is that I think every generation of parents, I think I've seen 2 now, is getting smarter about this.
Yeah.
And so the resources that I really put them to is there's some excellent books that have come out. And I'm sure that everybody watching that's interested in this, that has kids, has either heard about or has read Jonathan Haidt's The Anxious Generation. That has gotten it's not really, I wouldn't even call it groundbreaking. It's more common sense, getting back to, kind of readjusting our expectations for screens in our lives, because we are still, it's only been 17 years since the iPhone came out. And really, if you count, only about 12 or 13 years since it was just unanimous that everyone had a smartphone in their pockets. And so I get that concern, but at the same time, there is so many good resources out there. I love the Facebook group, Wait Until 8th. They take a very firm, and again, sometimes you do, but they take a very firm stance on waiting until 8th grade to give a child a phone.
Yeah.
And even then, giving a child a phone in 8th grade, it needs to be basically a phone and messaging machine at that point. And I'm sure that you agree, again, having teenagers. And so it's one of those big concerns that we deal with and talk about. That's one of the number one questions of your question you asked before, was what is one of the questions that I get so often is, when can I give my kid a phone? Like, parents are almost seeking permission, maybe even from somebody like me. I hear it at nearly every workshop that I go to, is when is a good time to give my kid a phone? And the answer to that is just, your child better than anybody. So I can tell you right now that some of my children are not going to get a phone for a little while because of different things that happen in my family and the dynamics and the attitudes. And we know our children better than anybody.
Yeah.
And so you have to use that as a determination. So there's not a hard and fast age or factor, but those groups like that on Facebook that are constantly encouraging you to just stand your ground.
Yeah.
That's a good resource as well. And while it's not necessarily a technical resource, but it's just one of those encouraging resources. Another resource I point people to is I'm plugging it because he's my brother-in-law, but I'm also plugging it because it's a great resource. He has this website called With Travis, and he it's basically movie reviews for free.
Yeah.
He does all sorts of movie reviews. He goes and sees movies with his girl. He's got 2 girls that are ages 13 and 11, and he goes and sees movies with them, and sometimes just reviews movies and reviews TV shows. Does all sorts of really interesting stuff with kids. He was a youth minister for a while. Now he's actually a pulpit minister in Franklin, Tennessee here. And so he has a lot of good resources just to check those different things out. And the other resource that I really point people to, and I've tried to make it a destination of sorts, just so people can go have a central place to see all these links. And that is digitalparentingworkshop.com. And if you just go to /resources, I've got, ever-growing list. I think I add a link or two every month of all sorts of different resources that you can go to. The Child Safety Center, the Wait Until 8th, all these different groups that you can be a part of, but also places and practical things like what do I do when my kid wants an Xbox and wants to play online on an Xbox? Yeah. So what do I do when my kid wants to get on Instagram? And it's kind of these practical things as well, like different articles that have been collected there and such. And I've got a guide that goes along with the workshop that you can open and click all the links on it. And it's got a bunch of that stuff on there as well. So again, it's not the be all end all, but there was such a lack of resources when I started this in 2013, 2014. It was all about pornography. It was centered on pornography and not letting your kids view that and protecting your kids' eyes from that. And again, that's absolutely, we should do that. Adults and spouses should absolutely do that and protect your families from those different things. But there's so much more when it comes to teenagers and when it comes to you're giving a 13-year-old child a device in their pockets that can access the wealth of all human knowledge.
Yeah.
If it's not protected, if it's not locked down, if there's no limit on those things, it could be a fire hose of stuff.
Right.
And they do not, at no time in our history has that ever been an option.
Yeah.
And now it is. And I encourage parents, just put the basic screen time protections on. If you have no clue what to do, just turn on the screen time stuff or go to digital well-being with Android phones and turn on the basic protections and until you figure out more things, because letting them have that fire hose, it's akin to letting them not knowing how to swim and then just being tossed into an Olympic-sized swimming pool. And so we cannot do that. And we've seen so many repercussions from that. And again, I'm saying a lot of things here. Stop me if I need to stop. But it's just one of these kinds of big concerns about there was 10 years ago, there was very much of a lack of resources. And now that we've come into this smartphone information age now, I feel like there's just so much more out there for parents that really there's no excuse for us to not have a strategy if we have children with devices.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things is you were talking about even the basic screen time protections and things. When we think about kids who are teenagers and you get 16 and you get your driver's license, you get access to a car, one of the things I can remember in those moments was the lesson of, hey, this car, it'll go wherever you tell it to. You've got to be in control. And so when you think about giving a child a phone, one of the neat things about being able to do that is when you put a child behind the driver's seat of the car, you're in control of the whole thing. You've got to have every piece of it. It's possible to give phones to young people that don't have everything in it, that are locked down to a point where you can use it for this and this,
Yes.
and unlock it at certain levels, and I didn't realize until we got to that phase ourselves how many resources were out there, and just how even now, like you said, the basic screen time settings, it really facilitates extra communication too.
Yeah.
Because, hey, I need more time on this. Well, your question, there might be some real reasons why you need more time on it.
Yep.
That, hey, I've been working on this project at school where we've needed to be online, and so I need more time on Safari or whatever. But it always prompts that discussion, so you're talking about why you're using it.
Yes.
And that's huge. And I know...
Well, that's never a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's never a bad thing to be talking more and educating your kids about those things and saying there is not a lot of steps for you to find something that you shouldn't be looking at.
Oh, absolutely.
It is very easy to do. And I think there's a certain... kids are naive.
Mm-hmm.
They're not... I truly believe that most kids want to do well, and they do not want to seek out trouble on their devices. They don't want to look at things that they're not supposed to. But there's this naivete that they just don't know, and they don't have the things that were ingrained into you and I when we were growing up, when we didn't have devices like these of like, don't talk to strangers and don't, they don't have kind of those kind of red flags that come up sometimes. And so again, it's our job as parents to, like you said, communicate with them and educate them.
Yeah. And it's important, even the most basic things, it's important to realize that we grew up in such a different time. And there's so many little assumptions you can make that they know. I was talking with one of our sons not too long ago about a TV show I can remember watching. I said, oh yeah. And more people started watching, so they'd have to find ways to catch everybody up, at the beginning of the episode. And he said, well, why didn't they just start with episode 1? I was like, well, there was a time when all you could watch was what was on that TV channel.
Right.
And it just never clicked with me that he's never lived in that world.
That's right.
And so there are just so many shifts in the way that they're thinking that they're not going to naturally know some of the things we know. And it wouldn't be their fault. It's just because in the world they've lived in, this has always been available.
Well, you think about what has changed. Like you said, what has changed in just the last 2 decades from 2004 to, let's just go to 2024, 20 years right there. What has changed in technology?
Yeah.
We went from DVDs to having streaming everything.
Yeah.
We went to looking up anything on YouTube. YouTube did not exist in 2004.
Right.
Which just blows my mind. And now we have these, what I call ubiquitous tools that we take for granted so much. Even adults take for granted so much. And what we're seeing now, and I know you've dealt with this a little bit, is AI and the chat bots and the things that we talk to and have conversations with. There are kids that are carrying on conversations with AI chatbots all day long as if it's another friend that they have, which could be unhealthy, could not. We don't really know the impact of that because we really have only been living in that era for a year and a half, 2 years now. And so there's a whole other implications of whether or not AI is correct in what it's saying or is going to slant certain things a certain way because it's a certain company based in a certain state or a country or whatever. Like there's so many different implications with that it's just, and it feels like to us as parents, like, well, it's just another thing to watch, another thing to worry about.
Right.
And I try when I'm talking with parents, either on a personal level or on a workshop level, I try to encourage them and say, you don't have to do that. You don't have to take part in any of that. You can segment yourself off and have your kid only have access to these things. Now, there's something to be said also for training them up in the way that they should go so that they will not depart from it, as far as making sure that we're doing everything spiritually that we're supposed to be doing with them, of course, right? Yeah. But when you think about bringing them up to be a good digital citizen, you don't want them to get to college and have been completely sheltered, but at the same time, you don't want them to get to college and having had access to every single thing under the sun. Right. So there is and I really try to preach balance. There's a balance there that you as a parent, that's probably the most difficult thing that we have to do, is strike that balance. And I'll be honest with you, I'm figuring it out right now.
Sure, yeah.
I've got a 13-year-old who is constantly just pressing up against those boundaries, and it's difficult sometimes to know what I can give him access to versus not. And so yeah, it can get very complex really quickly. But again, I just try to assure parents that this is something that you can, if you sit down and have a strategy. I tell parents all the time, you've got a strategy. You know how to put together strategies. You've strategized how to get kids from different schools to soccer practices. You've strategized investment accounts, retirement accounts. You've strategized all that stuff. We have to sit down and have a plan the same way for digital parenting as we would for anything else. If we're putting an addition on our house, or if this is where we're going on vacation, we have to have a plan for those things, just like we would anything else.
Well, and even to use your swimming analogy, the goal of teaching a child to swim will be that child is able to swim on the deep end of the pool in open water, or whatever. That's your goal.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think any of us would say the best way to that goal is just to toss them out there to begin with. You want to build some skills before you get there. So all of us, if we're wanting to raise children that'll be responsible digital citizens, the goal is that they'll be able to navigate all of the internet and all of that. So we're not going to keep them from that forever.
Right.
It's the idea of, okay, how can we segment things out so they're building up skills so that when they do get to that point, whatever age that is, adulthood, that we've helped them develop skills that they didn't have to learn by trial and error. They didn't have to learn by going down the wrong road and having to come back from that. To me, that's a helpful way of thinking about it. I like the way that Neil Postman, who's a guy whose writings I like a lot, and he was writing just at the beginning of the internet age. His last book was, but one of the things he pointed out about technology is people would always accuse him of being anti-technology. And he would say, well, that doesn't really make any sense. No human being can be anti-technology completely. He said, I'm not anti-food. I need food to live.
Yeah.
He said, the goal is trying to figure out what food is best for me, what food may or may not be poisonous, what food may or may not be healthy. So being discriminating in that sense doesn't mean you're against technology. It just means you're trying to do what's healthy. And that to me has been a helpful way in those conversations of saying, yeah, okay, we're not doing this right now. And it's not because you don't trust your child. It's not because you don't love your child. It's actually the opposite.
You would protect your child.
Yeah.
Regardless. This is the arena that is one of the most important that we sometimes forget about, that we need to protect them.
Absolutely.
And that your point being made about the food and eating the food, I talk about, we don't want to be Amish, but we also don't want to be Elon Musk. Elon Musk is quoted as saying he wants technology in every single thing. And there's nothing better than more technology. And neither one of those approaches are correct, because there has to be a balance there somewhere. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right about that.
Well, and you mentioned the AI challenge too. And that's going to be a new one, especially for our kids. And you think back to the food analogy, there are going to be a lot of healthy ways to use AI to help. But right now we're kind of at the dawn of that and trying to figure out, okay, what is helpful? It does scare me when I think about children having conversations with AI. So now it's not, here's information, I'm judging whether it's right or wrong. It's like, here's a person I feel like I'm talking to. So again, will there be benefits to that? I'm sure there will be, but it's trying to figure out as a parent, that just will mean more conversations and more about what's happening. And when this happened, when that ChatGPT said this, okay, let's think about that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's try to think critically about that.
And my fear, and I do have a little bit of fear on this, but my fear is that I feel like we just started to figure out the smartphone generation.
Yeah.
And then AI kind of comes in and throws the wrench in the works and says, here's a whole new level, a layer of things that you need to be worried about with your kids. And I think that I mean, we will find as human beings, we will find irresponsible ways to do anything.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that I try to encourage parents and say, it is not going to be up to the government. It's not going to be up to some federal regulatory commission or anything like that to protect your children. It's going to be up to you.
Yeah.
And I get a little serious with it because I say, we have to make sure that we're getting this right, because this is, as a parent, this is what we're going to be held accountable for.
Mhm.
When all is said and done, and when, God looks at how we raised our children. And again, our children are going to reach a certain point where they have independence, and we understand that. But when we have those children, they are in our charge to protect them from these things, just like we would anything else.
Yeah.
Just like we wouldn't take them to the bad part of town, or we wouldn't. We would tell them not to stick a fork in an electrical socket. Like those things, we protect them in physical ways. We have to protect them the same way in a digital way, just as voraciously as we would in a physical way.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is, I think you're right to point out that it probably should make us a little uncomfortable, to think about AI. I know one of the things that in interviews of developers for some of these like large language models that you can type in questions to, and you can say, write this or do this.
And that's what it really is, by the way. It's not really AI.
Yeah.
When we have real AI, everybody will know it.
Right.
You're talking to a language model.
Yes.
But anyways, it's terminology, but still.
And it's telling you things, and even the developers will say, number one, this was designed for speed and not necessarily accuracy or truthfulness.
Yes.
Which is worth kind of making you stop and think about, okay, it can put sentences together, but it has no way of saying whether this is true or not. This just makes sense of the data it has. And then secondly, some of these developers I've read in interviewers, they can't always explain how it's doing things, which is also kind of troubling, where you're like, well, shouldn't you know? Didn't you develop this? And so you can see, there's one example I think of a guy who had sort of as an experiment for his Jewish Sabbath service had asked ChatGPT to create a sermon for him to preach. And it was in the sermon, there was a quote by a Jewish philosopher that was completely fabricated. The philosopher's real, but the quote didn't exist.
Oh, yeah.
And so, something in whatever the program was put that together. And so these kinds of, hallucinations.
That's exactly what they call it. Yeah.
That makes you wonder, okay, if we've got a generation that gets really comfortable saying, oh, just like going to Google, this will tell me what I need to know. And are we building in that discernment feature for our children? So that.
Well, and it's different when, and this is just a really strange example, but I was looking for a new gas can, and I get on, because I did not like the current selection of gas cans. So I get on ChatGPT, and it gives me a nice little list of things. And I picked the first one, found it at Lowe's, and it's fantastic. But when we're asking it about things that actually matter, spiritual matters, biblical interpretation.
Oh yeah.
That's a whole, I mean, if it's said that it's pulling things from the internet as a resource, all of its, whatever it is, 4.5 billion data points or whatever like that. If it's pulling all of its resources from the internet, then I know for a fact there's things and places that I can go on the internet where people have written inaccurate things about the Bible.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And you know that as well. Every preacher knows that. Every teacher knows that.
Yeah.
Every person should know that. But it's one of those types of things where when it does hallucinate and just come up with something like that, well, they can't even, like you said, they can't even tell you why it's doing that yet.
Yeah.
So we're in this infancy. They have thrown this thing out at us as something that's necessarily complete. But if you look at it very closely, every time you use ChatGPT, it says ChatGPT is in beta form. Answers may not be accurate. But our kids don't see it that way.
Yeah.
And you think about us as adults, and you mentioned this as well, like we grew up we're a unique generation that were born in the early 80s that grew up in the generation of analog, but now we've been able to adapt to the digital world.
Yeah.
And the generations above us or older than us or generations younger than us didn't have those experiences. They didn't have both worlds. And what we see now, I think we're uniquely prepared. The people in their probably, I guess, people our age, 40 to 45 right now. I think we're uniquely prepared to really minister to this next generation of kids, the next generation of parents. That I see these young parents out there who are in their early 20s, mid 20s, who some have said, I will never allow my children to have access to this because I had access to it like this, and it almost killed me, all these different types of things. And so there's all of this complexity, and then you add in the AI stuff, and it can seem completely overwhelming. And again, going back to that point, is I just try to encourage parents that this is manageable.
Yeah.
There is tools out there. We can use fire to fight fire. We can use technology to help us figure out these things for us.
Yeah. That's such an important point. And again, when we think about, Paul telling the Christians in Corinth to take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ, just that training of everything that's coming at me through that screen, or, training our children to do that is going to require some involvement. And I think a point you made too is very good, that it will look different for different children. Like a lot of things in parenting, it will, depending on the child, things might be different. Privileges might come at certain times or other times. I mean, that's always been true in parenting. Now it's just in this technological arena is different. So I appreciate that. Is there anything else that we haven't kind of touched on in this conversation that you think, hey, I wish parents knew this, or here's something I've learned that,
I'll tell you what I say at nearly every workshop is that this is the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
There's the 90% of this, the stuff that you need to do, the work that needs to be done to make sure to keep up with this kind of stuff, 90%, it's all at home. You got to go home and actually do this.
Yeah.
And so that's the most difficult part. And I really say not to just encourage parents and energize them, but to help them stay consistent. Consistency in parenting is incredibly important to begin with, but consistency in parenting with technology becomes even more important.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing, I guess, a final thing that I would add. But again, there's been so many people that I've talked to over the years at different churches, and so many different people that have had successes and failures with parenting, whether it be connected to technology or not. And so basically, for the parents out there, I would just say, just keep doing what you're doing, keep being extra vigilant, and frankly, just be relentless with this stuff, because this is your children's future that you're talking about.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a great note for us to end on. And I like that thought of being relentless. Hopefully this conversation has been an encouragement to do that, not just with our children, with ourselves, what we take in. And so we really appreciate you joining us on Connections. We hope that if you're in the Murray County area and you don't have a church home, that you'll worship with us. You'll receive a warm welcome from the Graymere Church of Christ. But we also hope that wherever you're listening to this, if you can subscribe, if you can be a part of this regularly, we hope that it's a blessing and an encouragement to you. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for being part of Connections. We hope it was an encouragement to you. If you live in the Columbia area and don't have a church home, we would love for you to worship with us. You can find out information about meeting times, classes, and what to expect at graymere.com. You will always receive a warm welcome from the Graymere Church of Christ.